Hey, everybody. Welcome to week number 2 of season 46 of SNL, the SNL Stats panel. I have an amazing panel for you tonight. My name is John from SNL Stats. And if you haven't checked out our last 2 weeks of shows, we had an amazing panel for our preseason, including someone who was on that show. It will be joining us tonight, as well as an incredible panel for the episode 1 with Chris Rock. Please go check that out. We have them available on YouTube right now. Search SNL Stats or they're in your podcast feed. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and do not miss any episode. But tonight, we are going to be talking about the Bill Burr and Jack White show, which I have to say was a very interesting show, especially for the time we're living in. So it's going to be great to talk about it. We're going to go through everything with an incredible panel. And first, I would like to welcome back to the show our first 2-time guest. He is 3 away from getting a 5-timers jacket. I would like to welcome back to the show Mr. Dave Buckman. Dave, how are you doing?
Hello. Hi. How are you?
How's it going, Dave?
It's going great. It's good. I'm back in Austin after some traveling, so I'm happy to be here and present.
Okay. Well, we're happy to have you back on the show. Got a lot of nice compliments about you from our preseason show, so no pressure for this time.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. So we welcome back Dave. And then next up on the panel is Andrew Dick. He is the host of That Week in SNL, which is a podcast that is available right now. You can search it and they go through old episodes of SNL and do some really fun recaps of those. So I'm going to stop talking about it because I want Andrew to tell everybody what he does. So Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. You want me to say more about the podcast?
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll do some plugs at the end, but just so everybody kind of knows your background with the show and how tell everybody kind of how you got into SNL and why you started your podcast.
Well, I started watching late 90s, mid-late 90s, Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry cast. And also those halcyon days where like Comedy Central was like 90% SNL reruns. Yep. So that was nice. And so, I just really jumped in with both feet until about 2003 or 4, late stages of high school. The shows they just kind of lost me for a while. And then eventually, slowly, I just got back into it. I started reading about like the Dick Ebersol years and just like, I've never seen any of that, and started diving into that and just getting fascinated with the history of the show. And eventually that led to the podcast that I do with my friend Tim Cicali, where we discuss old episodes of SNL. That Week in SNL. Check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll definitely tell everybody about the new episodes you have up. We'll say that for the end of the show. But right now, I'm going to introduce our last panelist tonight. And this is a guy I'm really excited to have on also because, if you're on SNL Twitter, the SNL in Review Experience, that Twitter account. And they're all about talking about every alumni there is. So the creator of the SNL in Review Experience is Andy Hoglund. He is a writer who does SNL recaps and alumni interviews for EW and Vulture. Andy, welcome to the show. How you doing?
John, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun, and I just want to say, being on the panel here with Andrew and Dave, I'm big fans of both your guys, and whether it's the Aftermath or whether it's That Week in SNL, I'm a fan more than anything. So it's cool to be part of this.
Yeah, we welcome you. Andy, have you been on an SNL podcast before?
Yeah. I was on the New Jersey one, and okay. I was on Jill and Amanda's during the hiatus back during last spring.
Okay, well, they're really good friends of the show. They joined us for our preseason panel.
I saw that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we have a really great community. And, you are a guy, I'm going to transition here because you are a guy who, like I said, writes SNL recaps every single week. So you speak to a lot of alumni. And that's one of the things that I think it's really great what you do. If you haven't checked out Andy's Entertainment Weekly recaps, he speaks to alumni about every single episode every week. So I believe this week you had Jeff Richards on your recap.
Yeah, Jeff's a great guy. He's a good buddy. And he recently, I'm not going to plug my stuff. I'll plug Jeff's stuff. He just recently started his own podcast as well, too. So if you guys have the inclination, please check out the Jeff Richards show as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't he just have Daryl on? Did I see that?
Yeah. Daryl is going to have him on. and he just had Daryl on as well too, as part of the first 5 episodes, and Punky Johnson and Jamie Kennedy, a few other folks. So it's fun watching it grow, just as it's fun watching this grow. A lot of growth happening this year.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool projects. So I gave Andrew an opportunity to kind of give his background on SNL. Andy, why don't you give us your kind of background of how you got into the show and became such a super fan?
I mean, I guess I'm going to have to date myself a little bit. I think it goes back to Wayne's World, the Wayne's World phenomenon back in 1992. You know, I distinctly remember being a Cub Scout, and everyone's quoting the movie. It was just one of those movies like Borat or Austin Powers, where just everyone was name dropping it. And when I made the connection, again, with Comedy Central just being ubiquitous, realizing that this had started as a sketch before it was a movie, that kind of like really led me down the rabbit hole, you know, even as a, you know, elementary school kid, of discovering, oh, you know, some of your favorite actors like Eddie Murphy and Bill Murray, before they were in Ghostbusters and Beverly Hills Cop, they were cutting their teeth on this show. And, you know, I think I was at least a casual fan back then. And in 2015, I was doing a column for a website that was powered by Boston.com. And that's how I initially came up with the concept of doing anniversary pieces for, you know, SNL related movies. You know, so if it was the 25th or 35th anniversary for Caddyshack, or, you know, 20th anniversary for Happy Gilmore, things like that, you know, I was doing like little recaps about the legacy of these films. And it just has kind of like morphed and taken on a life of its own since then. And, you know, I've been really lucky to kind of make the connections and be able to write these snapshot pieces of some of the show alum, because I really love that aspect of it. You know, not just necessarily talking about, you know, the pop culture icons like Bill Murray or whatever, John Belushi, you know, because we've heard those stories so many times, but helping to really, you know, shine a light on someone like Patrick Weathers and getting drinks with him in the French Quarter, or going up to the Hudson Valley and meeting with Denny Dillon and getting to have lunch with her.
I read that. That was a good one.
Oh yeah, that was one of my pieces from over the summer.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just kind of how it's evolved. It's been a great journey, and you know, it's fun to really capture those stories.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's amazing. And this is exactly what I wanted for, and this was the idea for the SNL Stats panel, is to get a bunch of people together who are, you know, are these major super fans who can call out cast members from season 6 of the show and talk about it. Because not everybody can do that. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of season 46 casuals who are just checking out the show and don't realize the history behind every single sketch and every single cameo that happens on a weekly basis. So this is really cool to have, in my opinion, 3 experts on the panel with me tonight who really know the show for 46 years. So I'm going to transition right now to kind of talk about the season so far. So let me bring in Dave here, because Dave, we spoke a little bit prior to the show where you had emailed me and said there, you know, there were some things you had to kind of get off your chest about what you're seeing so far in season 46, and you weren't on with us last week. So give it to me. I want the hot takes. I want to hear what you're feeling so far about season 46.
About season 46. Well, certainly a rocky start. I think there's a lot going on that we, the viewers, aren't seeing that's causing the rocky start. I think the writing's been good. I think the performances have been good. I think the pacing is rough. I think a lot of that is you got 2 comedians who are not great sketch performers hosting. And so as much as I love Chris Rock, you know, he's never the greatest sketch performer. And Bill Burr, first time hosting, you know, he's a stand-up, and it's a completely different sensibility. Plus you have all the different things going on with COVID that are keeping people, you know, separated. Who knows where the cameras are or how many people are allowed on set. And so there's a little bit of like a rocky road, I think, happening right now, especially early in the episodes. I think they're having fun towards the end of those episodes, but certainly the ones where it counts, like you want them to be knocking out of the park those first 2 or 3 live sketches. Seem like they're really being hampered by cue card reading, by missed cues, by a slower camera transition. People kind of get lost in the weeds a little bit in the lines. That's kind of hurting the pacing of the comedy, which are letting some really good writing kind of like fall a little flat on some of those jokes. But I think Weekend Update is killing it. I think.
Well, you know what, Dave, not to interrupt you, but I want to get into all of that because I think you said a bunch of really interesting things, and there's a lot of aspects to that. One of the questions I had coming into this, I felt the same way. I felt like the pacing was a little bit off in the last couple shows. When you start the show with a 12 or 13-minute debate sketch, go right into a monologue, and then go into commercial.
Probably being written Thursday or Friday.
For sure. But then the pacing of the entire show is off because when you watch a show that isn't in debate mode and they have a 6 or 7 minute cold open, we have another sketch in there. And to me, that feels a little bit more formulaic. But I want to bring in Andrew. So Andrew, tell me what you think, because from what Dave's saying, it's not really just that we have our 12 or 13 minute cold open. It's also that there may be some sloppy changes in the camera angles and other things going on behind the scenes that may be affecting the overall experience of the show.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell just how much rehearsal time they're able to get right now. I honestly don't know. But yeah, it does seem a tad sloppier than it should. And I don't know what's going on. Again, I just don't know if it's lack of rehearsal time, but it does seem that they said that they were going to be producing less sketches week by week, thus affording them the time to block out and rehearse the sketches. And I will say that I think some of that clumsiness did affect some sketches in this episode. Though I will say that I felt like Bill Burr did his best to elevate a lot of the material in last week's episode. So, but it is weird just having our first major sketch around midnight. That is strange. Like 20 minutes of material before you even get to the first commercial break, and it's just the cold open and the monologue basically. And it's like, that's not really like the cold open shouldn't be your longest segment of the show. Like that's supposed to be like, boom, let's get into the show, some energy, and then live from New York, and we're into it.
Right.
And I think if you're not hugely into the political material that they're producing right now, like myself, it kind of starts it on a 15-minute down note of just like, okay, come on, all right, let's go. So no, definitely.
And Andy, we love the show. That's why we're doing these podcasts and these panels and stuff like that. And we want to see the best possible show we can on a Saturday night. So for anyone who's checking us out, we're not here to complain about the show, but what I do want to do is basically say that there could potentially be some issues that are worth addressing from what we've seen in the first 2 weeks. And I'm curious your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, first, I'll say just anecdotally, recently I was watching some of the Peacock broadcasts that they've made available, some of the old episodes. And I forget which episode it was right now, but Phil Hartman did Andrew might remember, Phil Hartman did a cold open that was like maybe 45 seconds or a minute long. And it was just him. And it was like, boom. And it was like that surge of energy, and you went into the credits, and then I forget who the host was, but all of a sudden you're into the monologue, and the show has started 10 minutes in, and it was just such a glaring contrast to the last few episodes or the last few seasons, frankly, where the first third of the show is bogged down by the political code open and the monologue, which the quality varies. So I think if you want to pick like a word of the day or one singular word that describes the first 2 episodes so far, I think disjointed would be the word. And it's like, look, like the show is always fragmented just by the very nature of what it is, right? But, from like these elements that we're talking about, the cold open, the monologue, update, all these different pieces of the gumbo, there's so little time, the celebrity cameos, there's so little time to really focus on sketches as their own, let alone spotlight 20 different cast members. That is like the comedy equivalent of Too Big to Fail, essentially,
Yeah. And this is one of those things that, we were discussing last week on our show, and as a journalist, I'm gonna send it right back to you, Andy, because I was very curious if this could potentially be some headline chasing. Is it that there's so many more eyeballs on the cold open that they want to extend this as long as possible?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
Like this is at the end of the day, they're an extension of NBC, and they know what gets clicks, and they know what advertisers are driven by. And I mean, I've never worked, for the show or for a network for that matter, but the calculation seems pretty obvious that, they got addicted, whether it's post Tina Fey, as Sarah Palin, or what have you, but they know what is going to break through in a pretty, fragmented, decentralized, environment culturally,
Mm-hmm. And Dave, I mean, you just like opened up this discussion by saying your thoughts on it. Do you have any Band-Aid solutions that you think that you would like to see in the next few episodes?
Well, I'll tell you, that opening sketch was 3 sketches. They wrote 3 sketches and strung them back to back to back and called it an opening sketch. So I would encourage them to pick one horse in that race. If you got Maya, do Kamala, do a Fly sketch later on in the show. I think we could all use it. You know what I mean? Like, they just wanted that Fly reference, the Jeff Goldblum reference. That Fly no one counted on that Fly. So of course they're going to hit it, but they hit it so hard, and we went off on this Herman Cain tangent. So I would say, I think we need the politics right now. I think everybody's kind of expecting. I think Lauren has been talking about it for the last 5 or 6 years, how much America needs his political sketches. But I think they could do some editing. I think in those early sketches, hit it harder and faster, and not try to scattershot the whole week in one 12-minute sketch.
And I will say that I personally don't have a problem with, say, the debate sketch sort of unfolding into other things. Like, in theory, the whole Fly thing could have been fun if it wasn't the exact thing that everybody in America said they should do, so they did it. I was like, come on, guys, you're comedy writers. Don't just do what randos on Twitter said you should do, and then you just do it, and it's like, yeah, it's the Fly. But I'm not against a sketch sort of unveiling itself and moving into other areas, especially if it's something like just a dry debate sketch. Like, I really did not want 12 minutes of just Maya and Beck, mostly just repeating the beats of what happened.
The one thing that I would say, just as like a little bit of a devil's advocate for the sketches, I do like when the show gets a little dark and gets a little weird. It
was a dark episode.
Yeah, it was, and I think that's why I kind of like this more than some of the other like cheerleading stuff that the modern show typically does. The Herman Cain thing, I didn't think it was that sharp satirically, and I didn't find it especially funny, but I did kind of admire, they're making fun of a guy who's been dead for 6 weeks. That took a little bit of guts, I suppose, even if I'm not quite with it. But the one thing that I would say in defense of that sketch is I did like seeing Jim Carrey do an impression of his old Earth Girls Are Easy co-star. Anything that keeps that movie in the zeitgeist works for me.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, for me, I was going into this episode with an expectation that we weren't going to see Jim Carrey tonight. And that I thought would be a strategic choice by SNL to not push him too much at the beginning so they can extend the novelty of Jim Carrey. Shame on me for thinking that was possible. But I just really felt like this was a perfect opportunity to, take a week off from Jim Carrey. He had a good, maybe at most, episode 1. And then you're probably going to have him for episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So episode 2 was probably the week to go all in on Maya Rudolph, go all in on Beck Bennett, try and find some angle of the debate that would be interesting. And, try and find something. I know we discussed last week, like, what is the thing that they're going for with Jim Carrey and Biden? And to me, the obvious thing to do, because SNL in the last 20 years for all their politicians has found a thing. And to me, that thing was Jim Carrey as Biden is going to hold himself back from getting too angry. And that was like what I thought they were going to play on. And it was going to be, that's what we saw in the first episode. And I was like, okay, there's something here because, like Dave, I'll bring you in for a second as like a comedian, because I know that you need to find something and develop it and then build on top of it and on top of it as you go. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And now we're going to see how far can they push this. Will Jim Carrey hold himself back before he goes like full on Hulk at Trump?
Yeah, I think it's a great hook, but I think Jim Carrey is too good of an impressionist to just have one hook for the season. He's there. He's in New York. They're going to use him. Alec Baldwin clearly does not like playing Trump anymore, but will do it as some sort of national service to us all, I guess. But he's there. They're going to use Maya and Jim Carrey as much as they can. And I'm sure, had the fly not happened, we might have just gotten a straight Maya and Beck scene. I think, you get Jim Carrey is one of the best impressions of all time. Everybody says, do Jeff Goldblum. He can do Jeff Goldblum. They're going to write that sketch. You know what I mean? So I think we have not even begun to scratch the surface of what this Joe Biden impression is going to be come Christmas.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also ask you, as like a big Jason Sudeikis guy and someone who you've known a long time, do you really, do you ever feel like Jim Carrey's Biden will ever be able to match up to what Jason did with the character?
Yeah, I love Jason's Biden. It grew on me so much. This is a different thing. This is like the difference between Daryl's Trump and Alex's Trump and Taron Killam's Trump. They're different Trump. And they're different takes on the thing. And, everybody's going to have their own take. You had all, after Will left, who did Bush? It was like Cornell.
A bunch of people.
Yeah. It was a bunch of people very quickly. Yeah.
Daryl and Parnell.
Yeah. So
very briefly.
It evolves. Yeah, it evolves, and so I'm sure we would all love to see Jason all season do Biden, but he's got Ted Lasso to do. So I think maybe we'll get a Biden multiplicity sketch at one point. Would be great with the two of them. But
Spider-Verse
yeah,
Biden.
It's going to evolve, and yes, exactly. Oh, that'd be a great sketch. But all the different Bidens, and Mulaney comes in as the pig Biden.
And Mulaney was Spider-Pig, so there you go. He was referenced.
Yeah, and I think we also had Sudeikis doing Bush for a while too.
That's right.
Oh my God, we did. I always forget that.
Yeah, we're gonna have a new Biden. Hopefully, come November, it'll be a completely different Biden. The candidates always turn into somebody completely different when they're a president anyway. So I'm sure that is going to evolve as well. And even when he's president or president-elect, other things are going to come up for Biden that's going to influence how he plays it.
Yeah. And Andrew, let me bring you in here because I think that this is a really interesting discussion. I love the passion that we're having because we do want to fix the show, at least a little bit. But how do you feel about the overall show itself, just beyond the cold open? I mean, like I said, the pacing was a little odd, but we actually have also like a ton of cast members, which we're going to get into, who are not even there. It's just, there's a lot of weird things right now.
Well, for me, this episode was kind of a make or break situation in terms of at least watching live, because I have not held back from my opinion that the last couple seasons, they just simply have not been my bag, mostly. I mean, the show can still produce great episodes. But watching that premiere, I did not like it. I did not like it at all. And I was like, all right, it's up to Bill Burr to save this from at least making me stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday watching the show. And I think we got there. I mean, there's at least a reprieve for now. But my biggest problem with last week to which it almost seems like they overcorrected with this one, was the premiere had no base in reality for me. One of my favorite things for SNL, especially vintage SNL, when you go back and watch it, you can sort of get some level of what the cultural zeitgeist was for that month, that week. And the premiere did not express any reality I'm part of.
Right.
The
That's a
debate
good point.
The debate didn't even express the debate that happened. It's like even the debate doesn't look like the debate that actually happened. And so apparently they heard me to some degree, and I think this episode does a better job of actually communicating what's going on. But by the time it got to like the mob sketch in the back half of the show, I was like, all right, well, maybe we've done one too many. You got to find that balance. But I forgot what the original question was.
No, I just was. I think you answered it, which was I was just curious about your overall opinion on the show itself and how things are doing. And look, I think we talked a lot about that. That I want to kind of move to the actual tone of this show and Bill Burr, which to me, one of the things that got brought up earlier was how kind of dark this episode was. And for those who are super fans and have been watching for 46 years, I mean, that was SNL at the beginning of its run. In the 70s, it was dark. It was, at a time when people were watching and they wanted to see the not ready for primetime players rebel against whether it was politicians or celebrity culture or whatever it was. And they would produce sketches. The writers would write these sketches that were dark and really like nothing, a lot of things that wouldn't even be allowed on TV now were done. I mean, like think about the first season where you had like Richard Pryor sketch that was like very famous and like so many things that they would do that you would never be done in this 2020 culture. That to me, this was really interesting because if you went on Facebook or Twitter during Bill Burr's monologue, you were hit with a lot of opinions. So, and I don't want to say what our own personal opinions are about everything, but I want to say like this was an interesting turn for the show. And is it something, Andy, that is a little bit of a one-off for you, that they're going to kind of take this dark path where they're talking about these sensitive subjects? Or is this something that maybe they should be doing more?
Well, I think absolutely they should be doing it more. The question is, will they and can they? I think this was largely they're reflecting and refracting, Bill Burr's sensibility, his ability to bite. I just think that the majority of people who's going to come on and host, they won't have that kind of perspective, and the show won't adapt to them, even if they do. The show is just in its current form. It's way too entrenched. It's an institution. They've gone from being anti-mainstream to being the mainstream. That's why I kind of think of it as this lumbering giant, and there is enough there that keeps me watching and engaged, because I think Andrew makes a great point about how the show mirrors its era, and I don't know if we can extrapolate some like our larger message about the show's like lack of ability to do that right now. Maybe that's in itself a message, but we'll see. I'll think of this as a happy 1 week. 1 week off or something.
Yeah. And Dave, let me bring you in on that. What's of the overall tone of the show? How did you feel about it? Did you love what was happening in terms of the tone of the show, or was it a little bit, off-putting?
Oh, it was off-putting. He was certainly trying to create persona around Bill Burr. That is Bill Burr's persona. Those are the topics that he talks about in his stand-up. Those are the topics that interest him. And he, the host, I'm pretty sure, has a great deal of sway of what sketches make it to the air. They're certainly in that discussion what they're comfortable with. So who knows what else got cut? But I think the show always reflects the times that they're in. Comedy itself reflects the times that they're in. And you go back to those first 5 seasons. That was a dark time for America as well, coming out of Nixon and all of the end of the Ford and the Carter administration, and it was kind of a general malaise in the country at that time as well. So another one-term president. So of course they're going to have dark sketches, and of course we're going to have dark sketches now. But I think, that is Bill Burr's sentiment. I'm sure Issa Rae is going to bring a completely different sentiment to her show, and the show will be built around her sense of humor and her persona, and it'll probably reflect her just as much. So I think strong personalities tend to create that creative art around them. I don't think J.J. Watt really cared what sketches he was in at all. But I'm sure Bill Burr very much cares what sketches he's in.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at an individual episode. We're more of a show that looks at the macro and the entire history of the show. But when you look at one individual episode and you start thinking, is the tone of the show decided by the cast or by the host? And it seems like the stronger hosts, the ones that have stronger opinions, maybe, are the ones that dictate the overall tone of the show. Whereas someone, like you said, like an athlete who doesn't have a full leg to stand on in the comedy world, probably gets dictated to as to what the tone of the show is going to be more. And I thought this was something that I want to get into, and I'm going to bring you in, Andrew, in a second, was an interesting contrast, because you had, I wouldn't necessarily say that the show was right-leaning on Saturday, but it was certainly pushing the envelope of what they would normally do on a Saturday night. And then you had Weekend Update, where you had Pete having his own conversation and discussion, and basically he ends it by saying vote for Biden at the end of Weekend Update, which is, you could believe in whatever you want and you can vote whatever you want, and that's fine, and Pete's totally entitled to have that opinion. But is that in almost in contrast to what the show is trying to do? So Andrew, I'll bring you in on this one. I know it's a difficult, interesting conversation to have, but from all your history watching the show, what do you think?
Well, you're not the first one to say that this felt like a more right-leaning episode, which I think is interesting, because there's something about Bill Burr, and let's discuss Bill for a second, because he's a very caustic comedian. Basically his persona is just asshole. And kind of, it's like a little bit of that throwback to the 80s, Dennis Miller or Dennis Leary, like he says what you're all thinking. And that is the voice. Like when you hear Bill Burr, that is the voice you hear. But he always zigzags on you. And so you think you're going into this realm, but then eventually you end up over here. And I think Bill's far more progressive than his character, his persona, his voice,
or his audience,
makes you believe. So like a lot of the and I love any episode of SNL that just makes people angry. That's always great. I feel that should be the energy from SNL. Really, just so many wild swings. And if you miss, that's fine, as long as you connect a few times. Personally, I'm happy. And so I did notice a couple people saying that, and I just don't feel that's indicative of what was actually being said. It just sounded like that's what was being said. But even in the monologue, the monologue was 6 of one, half dozen the other. Like started strong with the whole mask run, and then the Pride Parade thing at the end, that did seem pretty clunky and out of touch, and just like why are we doing this?
And contrived. Like that's not true. He definitely knows what Pride Week is like.
And I'm fine with a comedian, just I don't know that a comedian doesn't always need to establish a joke on their own experience. I can follow along to a degree, but yeah, that just like why now? Why this? And again, I can understand there's very little places to workshop this right now, so I don't know how much of this was new material for him. I do know he has a podcast, so maybe the stuff cooked up there, but that's still sort of in a bubble of Bill and whoever he brings on. So this is certainly not road-worn material, I think. It was interesting. I just like any episode of SNL where I felt like, I need to chew on this one for a while. I really need to digest this one. and really see what they were saying. Like, they were saying something, and that's not always the case.
He had a good enough out. He could have gone out on Take Your Talking To, and they applauded. He had applause line. He went one more, and he kind of lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Andrew, you're totally right, and that's why I think that for anyone who's watching this show, at least our show tonight, is that this gives you material to talk about. This is interesting, for as exciting as it was to have Chris Rock open up SNL for the first time after during the pandemic, and people are in masks, and there was a lot of things that were different. I mean, this is something that you're going to talk about. And I think people are going to remember the Bill Burr episode for a while, at least, and some sketches from it. And those are kind of the things that are exciting. And I'm not saying that the solution is always to push the envelope, but it is worth giving something, give people something to think about. And Andy, I think, like, to myself, like, who in the cast can do that on a regular basis? And I'm having trouble thinking of anyone besides Michael Che that pushes the envelope in the entire cast.
Well, Michael, I was about to say, actually, that this was a glimpse into what the show could have been had Shane Gillis, fulfilled his destiny as a cast member and blown up. Because I do think, Gillis and having someone like Bill Burr host, that's the show's way of trying to reach this audience pocket that, may have written the show off to a certain extent. And that actually kind of brings me to, a counterpoint that I think was made earlier. I think, Dave, you might have mentioned, that Rock and Burr aren't natural sketch performers. And that's actually what I kind of like about having these types of guys come on, because they do bring their own perspective, and they push, these super well-trained sketch and improv types, the theater kids, let's call them. It pushes them into a different orbit a little bit, which I find refreshing personally.
Well, let's not forget that Bill did perform in Chappelle's show and is an actor. So,
yeah.
I mean, he has done sketch.
Yeah.
And
Yes, that's true.
Breaking Bad.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, is that he's in 2 classic Chappelle show sketches. It's 2, right? He's in Sam Adams' Beer, and he's in the Racial Draft.
Yes. I mean, and I think he also wrote as well. So, yeah, I mean, he's around in the show. So, not all over the place, but he's done sketch. So
live sketch is so different.
Yeah.
Than being able to a couple takes, and it's really different than stand-up. I think stand-ups are going to push that envelope harder than anybody. And they're, any stand-up's going to create. When Seinfeld hosted, the show is basically around his persona. And Jay Leno hosted, it's basically about his persona.
But that's what I love. I mentioned earlier that I'm really into the early 90s SNL, the late 80s SNL. Like, I love that heavy stand-up presence. I don't know what it is, but I think obviously it can go bad. It can go very bad, as we've seen. But I think when it works, I think it's a nice balance to the force. Having stand-ups fit inside that kind of format, and taking their sensibility and giving it that kind of structure.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would love to do is, if you are a new viewer to SNL and you're checking out our show tonight and you're fascinated with this discussion about hosts that push the envelope a little bit, I would love to go around the panel and give me some episodes throughout the run of the show, each of you, that you can recommend to somebody who's, seen the last 4 or 5 years of SNL and has seen, kind of the same tone. And they don't know that there are, episodes upon episodes throughout the history of the show that are really great, that push the envelope. And I guess whoever wants to go first, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I just watched one the other night that was really terrible to push the envelope. There was one from season, I want to say 4, with not Henny Youngman, Milton Berle hosted.
I actually like the back half of that episode, I gotta admit. But it starts terribly, and anything with Milton is trash. But
I wanted to see it, and I found it on Hulu the other night, and I watched. I was like, oh my god, every scene is sexist or racist. Or misogynist or homophobic, and there's just so much to it. I think the people that really push the envelope for me, I love Buck Henry episodes, Because Buck Henry would come in and say, whatever sketch every other host didn't want to do, I'll do. And he would just clean out their computers before computers were a thing.
Typewriters.
Exactly. Clean out their files and do every sketch that nobody else wanted to do. And they loved him for it. And some of those are really edgy sketches, and they're a lot of fun. Some of them wouldn't play anymore. I love the Pierce Brosnan one. There's a lot of mayhem. There's murder. There's yelling at kids. Kids drinking. It's very inappropriate. But I think it's one of my favorite episodes of all time.
Yeah, and the reason I'm doing this is because we don't get to do this very often. We, for people who are following the show nowadays, we don't get to talk about these quote unquote dangerous episodes of SNL. So this is exciting because we can recommend things that you're not going to see very often on the show nowadays. So Andrew, what about you? Anything come to mind?
Well, springing off of the Milton Berle, I think the complete opposite of that. One of my favorite episodes is the Don Rickles episode. That one is pure joy, and somehow it's Don Rickles, and Lord knows the alchemy that man creates to walk the line of being so joyfully offensive. It's madness. And from the same, that's from the early 80s Ebersol era. And since that's a favorite of mine, I will also say any of the Bruce Dern episodes from that era are also just buck wild, incredible
Buck
madness.
Henry Wild.
Yes. Yeah. Buck Henry Wild, Bruce Dern.
What about you, Andy?
Well, actually, Andrew, when you bring up Bruce Dern, I loved the anecdote that Gary Kroeger gave on your interview with him a couple weeks back.
Oh, right. Because I mean, the thing I love about the Bruce Dern episodes is how dramatic they are, and the cold open begins with Gary Kroeger basically trying to commit suicide because he's been cut from the show. And so I think in dress or rehearsal or whatever, Gary was kind of winking a little bit, kind of playing it a little bit more comedically than he does in the live show. And Bruce came up and was like, no, you have to sell the reality of this. We have to believe you were suicidal. And that's how the show opens. So that's,
right.
That's your kind of in for a Bruce.
Yeah,
Dern
I just wanted
episode.
to plug that anecdote because I think that should show people who are looking for a darker SNL what to expect. I would answer maybe, I mean, this is kind of a famous, infamous one, the Andrew Dice Clay episode from 1990. Just because there's so much that went into that and the backstory there, and the idea of a comic as this dangerous figure, even if it's a notoriously bad episode. On the flip side, if people are looking to discover like the platonic ideal for me of an SNL episode, I might actually say the Susan Lucci episode from 16, like the Game Breaker sketch is one of my favorite sketches. That balance of just like a really, really well crafted sketch that also goes off the rails and goes into an absurd place. So that'd be my twofer.
Yeah, and don't tell Nora Dunn to watch the Andrew Dice Clay episode.
No.
But did y'all ever see the Smothers Brothers one where they rained out the show? The show is rained out.
Yes.
Oh yes, yeah.
The show.
Yeah, they did some weird things in I would say in the 80s where the whole tone of the show was completely changed, where they had like a running theme throughout the show. I believe they had, I can't think of the name, a famous director in at one point.
Coppola. The
Coppola, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You would see exactly the Coppola episode where it's basically he's directing the entire show in front of the camera.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah, so they would do.
People should just watch that whole season. That whole season is.
And I just watched the Charles Grodin one where the running bit was that he did not come to rehearsal, does not watch the show, doesn't know how the show works, and would just kind of like walk off set during a sketch or not know how a sketch is supposed to go, and but really bought gifts for everybody. He was excited to be in New York.
You know what they should do sometime? They should do more backstage sketches. Like rewatching the Peacock stuff recently, all the sketches where it's like the cast members playing themselves and the supposed backstage drama, even if it doesn't get like a great reaction from the audience, I'm always really amused at that kind of stuff.
Well, I think now is the time better than ever because this has such a crazy production cycle that, lean into that. Do something about the backstage environment of the show right now. Why not do something interesting?
Do something different.
Do something different. Yeah.
And I'm going to one up that. I'm going to say even more important now when you have 20 frickin' cast members, because that's really the biggest problem is that we don't know these guys as well as we should. And the perfect way to fix that is go backstage. I mean, this was basically the crux of the show at the beginning of its run. Was every single week during the cold open, you would go to their fake lockers backstage and see them talking to each other. And it was like, this is the reason why in the last few years, for those who are newer viewers, I love the Leslie Jones, Kyle Mooney stuff that they were doing with pre-tapes, because they built their own like Marvel universe of whatever, interactions between the cast members there were. And that to me was like, you couldn't get more 1975 SNL than doing things that are like that.
How much fun was it when Colin, in the middle of her update piece, said, Kate, are you okay? And it out of nowhere, that whole, what I thought was going to be just a lame idea, just blossomed into something beautiful. Just
exactly,
we're led into something wonderful and a real moment between them.
I still think it was a tad too long, but that finally really underlined the concept of what is going on here. Oh, that's what's going on here. And I think the Bill Burr episode had a lot of that. I do like that for SNL. I don't want a sketch to begin and a couple lines in, I think I know the conceit of this. Oh yeah, this is playing out just as I thought. There was a couple things in it where it just unveiled, and I didn't know where it was going, especially. So, and that's, I want that ride. I want that ride of the sketch.
We stick around for those good nights to watch those good nights because we believe in the camaraderie of this cast. That's kind of our favorite part. Most people's favorite part is, everybody's fantasy is to be part of that team and to see them like being real with each other and, high-fiving and talking to each other. That's what we all love anyway. So why not lean into that?
Yeah, and let's that's exactly the perfect way that I think we should transition back to this episode a little bit. I want to kind of go around the panel, talk about, like I said, we're not going to do sketch by sketch, but I want to do, what did we love from this episode? What didn't we love? And then I want to talk about the cast members, who's standing out to you through 2 episodes and who is not. So, Andy, I'll start with you. Tell me what did you love from this episode? What didn't you love from this episode?
I think Unprecedented would be my favorite sketch. From Saturday. I thought that, the real life, just seeing normal people and how the coronavirus has changed them. I thought that worked really well.
That's the new normal sketch.
Correct. Yeah, the new normal sketch. Other than that, other highlights, Jim Carrey vomiting as a fly. I won't lose that from my memory anytime soon. I thought Heidi Gardner as Jill Biden was surprisingly not surprisingly effective. Actually, she's always excellent, and was just quite the contrast with Jim Carrey as Joe, as we've already discussed. And then I guess number 3 would probably be the Sam Adams. Or no, I'm sorry, no, strike that from the record. If you want to cut that out from the podcast, you can, or you can leave it in. I think number 3 is.
You'll have to listen to find out.
Yeah. Number 3 is Beck's Enough is Enough, his short film, because I thought it was a great use of Beck's talents playing Oblivious, and I thought it was just an excellent, wry, smart commentary on people expressing their outrage and their political viewpoints on social media.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew?
See, Beyond the Sam Adams, that one really sang for me. I loved that one. That was the full blossoming of truly having Bill Burr on as your host and erupting into anger. The line about "is today the day you're gonna hit your old man?" That's just it was so lived in. So that was great, and actually, just the whole episode had a tone that I liked. Like, my takeaway for this episode was basically I enjoyed the intention more than the execution. And as I slowly, because as we talked about at the beginning, there's just a long ramp up into the episode. But when the sketches started to happen, specifically with the unprecedented sketch, where everything had a quieter slice of life tone to it, a little bit more dramatic leaning than just in ages, really. And that's kind of my favorite type of SNL, to be honest. I really do like when, again, you have to have balance, but when we dip into the dramatics and not everything has to be punchline, 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 and just let a sketch unveil itself. So the Sam Adams really stuck out to me. The Weekend Update was on fire. Che especially. That was just incredible. After I felt just the premiere update was kind of, I don't think they knew exactly where they wanted to go. Felt a little bit like dipping the toe back in the water, and then they just jumped in with the second one. So that was brilliant. And what was the Beck Bennett one again?
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough, which was kind of a rewrite of a season 42 sketch, which was taking on the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad. Basically had the same beat of like, oh, okay, it's terrible, I should take it down. But this one, again, it's so insular. That was my favorite part of it. Was it's almost all Beck by himself, and just this man in his apartment, just watching his entire life crumble over the course of like a minute because of this video, was super fun. And I think the unprecedented and the Blitz sketches kind of hampered by timing issues, especially the Blitz, where there was a lot of clusterfuckery there, it seemed. But the intention and what they were trying to pull off, I was on board for, and I felt like still Bill anchored it and never lost his place. And even if there was an odd, awkward silence, he was still able to stay in character and stay in the sketch and bring us into the next section. So, if the next episode is even better than this, I feel we're back in a good place. Yeah. Is my takeaway.
Yeah, that's interesting. And before I get to Dave, a couple of interesting stats was you mentioned the Kendall Jenner one for the Enough is Enough, but actually for the Sam Adams one, this is the second appearance of a Boston establishment commercial.
Casey Affleck.
We had that with Casey Affleck a few years ago. And I believe even a couple of characters in it were the same. We get the second appearance of Mikey Day's construction guard, and now we know who his dad is. So
I hadn't thought about that. That's really good.
Yeah, so that's really great. I love building these worlds, which we don't get to build that often anymore because there are not these like recurring sketches that happen 15 times in a row. Even though people complain about those a million times, it's nice to kind of build worlds on SNL. And as far as the Enough is Enough thing, like you said, I think the thing that made that work the best was that he was going from room to room and getting call to call. And we just didn't see anybody on the other line. And it was really just Beck working off of himself until obviously you had Jason Momoa, which is a conversation unto itself about how they're going to be bringing guest stars onto the show. Is it going to be for these like pre-taped cameos, which probably makes more sense than flying people out to New York on a weekly basis due to COVID.
But at least that one felt organic for the sketch.
Agreed.
Yeah, and he's like their new favorite cameo at the show, Jason Momoa.
Yeah. But I did love the line about, it would actually mobilize his fans. Oh, right.
Yeah. Dave, so let me bring you in here. What did you like? What didn't you like?
Let's see. I am not liking Beck's Mike Pence. I think there's a better Mike Pence impression out there. I think Beck is doing an impression of himself as calm. He's doing an impression of Mike Pence's calm demeanor, and that's kind of always. But there's so much more to Mike Pence physically and vocally that he's not doing, which is kind of weird for me. So
His Kamala demeanor.
Yeah, exactly. I think Maya's Kamala is getting much better. Feeling much more like Kamala Harris
right.
than it was last season at all. She sounds like her. She's getting her vocal tones. Let's see. I thought I liked the monologue. I thought the monologue was great. I laughed out loud several times. It got me. I like Bill Burr's stand up. I don't. I think more than pushing the edge, he just points out hypocrisy really well. I think that's kind of what his lane is, and it's like I love it when he does that.
Yeah. Well, what did you think about? I'll ask the next question to you, which is, Dave. Like, what do you think about the cast overall? Like, is there anyone who's really been standing out to you in these last 2 episodes? I know that one of the things I tweeted out yesterday was we have a 20-person cast, and we basically had 14 cast members this past weekend. Still no Melissa Villaseñor for the first 2 episodes. No Aidy, no Cecily, no Chris Redd, no Bowen this past weekend.
I know Andrew. Where's
Andrew? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Andrew's a friend, and I really want him to get some airtime.
Yeah.
I don't want him to get Luke Nold. You know what I mean? Let's see.
Hey, Dave. Actually, I have a question. Since you're friends with him, have you seen the movie that he did, Call Me Brother?
Every time they screened it here in Austin, the star of that and the writer of that is Christina Parrish, who's I think one of the funniest stand-ups I've ever seen in my life. And they're both Austin stand-ups. So every time they screened it in Austin, I was out of town or I had something to do. So
I just got the screener. It's a weird fucking movie.
Incest comedy, and it's so funny from what I've heard. I loved Kate's breakdown. I thought this was Pete's best weekend update rant.
Absolutely.
By a long shot. He seems the pandemic's been good for him. Because there's no bags under his eyes. He looks like he's been eating. He just looks like present and available and sharper than I've ever seen him. And I was really a fan of his tonight.
And to me, he's way less Sandler than he used to be.
Yeah, and I'm not always a big fan of Pete, especially when I kind of feel like he's, not doing well healthy wise. I think that reflects in his comedy, reflects in his timing, but he's been very good these last 2 weeks, better than I have given him credit for recently. And I tell you what I really enjoyed was Heidi's performance in the Sam Adams commercial, which was so out of character for her to play it as straight as possible, like spokeswoman, generic spokeswoman, without adding any kind of like weirdness to that character, which might have been a stretch for her for all I know. But I really enjoyed how she hit that note, that note so well, just to kind of like counterbalance the madness that was going around her.
Well, I think Heidi is one of the best dramatic actors that they have on the show right now. Like that's it was almost a shame for an episode that did seem to hinge on a little bit more quieter slice of life stuff, that Heidi really didn't appear too much in it because Mikey is quite adept at it. And we haven't really seen too many other, just not enough people getting that chance to really flex their dramatic tendencies.
Yeah, that's on my wish list, is for them to do remember the Sissy Spacek sketch with John Belushi? Something like that. I think Heidi would crush.
Oh, crush it. Yeah. I mean, we almost got there with the RV life sketch from the Corral, but even that had to kind of fart out an SNL ending at the end. And it was like, we were almost there. Oh, so close.
I wish I could have recast the unprecedented sketch and swap out Kate for Heidi, because I feel like Kate's broadness.
It was too broad.
Yeah,
and like my thing with the unprecedented, like I really did enjoy that, but I needed a smoother ramp up of madness. I felt that it didn't quite have. Like it kind of just had these bursts. The
pacing thing that you would have ironed out in a more seamless show, I think.
Yeah. But again, I appreciate the try. Like, please keep doing more of that. More of that.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you guys think in general about the fact that we do have cast members. It's one of the things that we discussed on the preseason show. We have cast members who are not going to be there on a weekly basis. And to me, it didn't have too much of an effect on the show. I think if you're not like following it in too much detail, it's actually kind of nice to be working with a smaller group of people so we can see them in more things. But did anyone feel like the show was affected a little bit by that?
It was weird seeing a lot of Beck. Like I like Beck, but I feel like he's probably, like a lot of cast members, somebody who probably should have moved on by now. And he's just not a backbone type of guy. I feel that Alex Moffat is really probably should be our backbone guy. Like that to me, Alex feels like our Hartman in waiting. And it's just kind of odd, like having a cast this big, like talking about Andrew Dismukes earlier, and just how we haven't seen him. I feel we haven't seen him because Kyle's still there. Like he could have been in the mob sketch, but I think we just cast Kyle instead, or Lauren Holt, where I'm already getting from people that just like it's hard to tell her and 80 apart, especially when you have them both in the same sketch. And that's nothing against Lauren, but it does seem like now that the cast has the replacements for the people that are still there, and it's odd. And to see Melissa get shut out again just infuriates me because like I just see the show not utilize such a unique voice and somebody who comes out and really, I think, crushes it every single time that they give her a chance to shine. So the fact that we still then after that go weeks, episodes without seeing her is just why are we not doing this?
Yeah, and it's not like we're getting the Kyle Mooney treatment where all of her sketches end up online somewhere. It's like we're not seeing her at all, and that sucks because I think
she was just tweeting through the episode, like she was just defending Bill Burr's monologue, which I mean, fine, but it really did seem like, oh yeah, I guess Melissa's not going to be part of the show. I don't even think she was on stage for the Goodnights. I don't think she was in the studio. So. I don't appreciate it, and I don't like that. I like Melissa a lot, and she brings the kind of vibe I want from the show. So yeah, that was a bummer. That was a bummer. Continues to be a bummer.
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be something we're going to continue to track throughout the entire season, which cast members are there and not there, and which ones are appearing the most, because I do think that we've finally, I think in season 46, reached the apex of this growth of the cast. And I think we're probably headed towards a smaller cast in the next few years. Hopefully, maybe not. Andrew, you're shaking your head, but I mean, it's my hope at least, because like I said, I think every single week when you have somebody going out there doing 3 or 4 sketches, that's when they shine. But I think when you have somebody who's not appearing in the show or only there for one sketch, they just don't stand out throughout the season. And that's how you one of the things here, I'll give a great example, which is over the last 2 years before I've done these panels, I was just tweeting out stats on the SNL Stats Twitter account. And I actually had people who were semi-affiliated with the show write to me and say, based on all of your knowledge and all of your notes and stats that you have, do you have any suggestions for what makes a successful SNL cast member? And obviously, I don't have the answers to that. I don't think it's a simple answer. I think that there's many ways to be successful on the show. But saying that, having a big cast means automatically, if you put in any math equation, there's just too many variables involved for you to be able to be successful in your long run on the show. And Dave, I'll bring you in.
I got one solid suggestion. Write yourself some really good sketches that put yourself in those sketches. the only way anybody has ever succeeded on Saturday Night Live is that's how Jason got into the cast. You know, that's how people.
Well, even Andrew, right? Andrew was a writer last year.
Oh yeah. Last couple of years, yeah.
He's got to write himself some sketches that feature him. As good as his sketches were that he wrote, he's got to write them around himself. I spent a couple years, me and a buddy, when Seth first got on the show, we would send Seth like 100 ideas for him to pitch, just for him and the host each week. Just like, hey, if you don't got no ideas, here's some free 100 ideas of you and the host. And we did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, just like hoping to get him some screen time as best as we could. And then Seth eventually learned how to write for himself and the host. And he did a lot of those sketches were just him and the host. A lot of those early hits he had were him and the host.
Mm-hmm.
But then why do you even have writers for the show then? Like, and that gets into a weird gray area for me personally of like, you know, why do you have writers for the show if we then demand that the cast writes for itself and we don't credit them, you know, in the credits for that?
You have your Farleys and your I'm trying to think of somebody else who is an amazing performer that just didn't write.
I mean, I think that's what Melissa or like a Lorraine Newman, like they just weren't comedy writers, but they're great performers.
I would say Keenan is probably a really good example, a guy who shows up and is given his lines and kills it.
Yeah. So I don't think that's the way the show should work, even though it does, because I think that puts people at a disadvantage who are just not good at sketch writing or just coming up with 4 ideas on one night and somewhat slapping them together. You know,
where would Will Forte be without the Falconer and Tim Calhoun? I mean, those are just early wins for him.
Yeah.
Featured his personality, his sense of humor, and made the show his own. To the point where they would just give him the last 5 minutes of the show each week to do whatever the hell they can think of.
Yeah. Andy, any 2 cents on all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the show is at a very strange, precarious place. You know, it seems like there's almost like I don't want to say method to the madness, but there's something deliberate about who's here this week, who's not here this week. Like I know like some of the big heavies have other projects going on, so they've kind of adopted this skeleton crew. I mean, but again, I think it gets back to the word of the day is disjointed. And, that for better or for worse with the celebrity cameos and with everything else that's going on, you're depriving oxygen from the next Will Forte to, grow into his role or come up with a Falconer sketch. I think there's a number of guys who have just so much potential, but it's like bumper cars, trying to even give them an opportunity to shine. So it's like the show wants to be so many different things that it's almost nothing at a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be my goal for the first run of the shows. And whenever we get to the end of it, whether it's 5 episodes, 6 episodes, I don't even think they know yet. But whenever we get to the end of the first run, the show that I do following that last episode of the first run is going to be really interesting because I want to track all the stats of who was in how many sketches, who's doing well for the first run of the show, and who needs to change a lot moving forward. So I'm going to put a pin in this discussion for now. And when, you guys will all be back with me throughout the season, and we're going to keep getting into that as we move forward. But there's a few more things I just want to discuss before we go. One of them is an amazing, I'm not sure how much they could have done because he was only on the show once, but it was just very nice to see that tribute to Eddie Van Halen on the show on Saturday. That is something that I want to, it's unfortunate we have these celebrity deaths, but when they do happen, I want to bring them up on the show to at least talk about that. So for those who don't know when that was from, that is actually from 1987, the Valerie Bertinelli episode where he cameoed with the Robert Cray Band. So, them going back to season 12 and showing a clip from that is always nice. So if anybody has any opinions about that. And then the great thing was Jack White with the, Eddie Van Halen guitar was amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
MVP.
Amazing.
MVP of the night, Jack White.
Yep.
Yeah, my goodness. We fell ass backwards into such an upgrade, I felt. Wow. I mean, I don't want to cast dispersions on Morgan Wallen and his music, but wow. I mean, we really lucked out with that. I don't, when the dust settles, I don't know where that's going to land, but like on the night, absolutely blown away. And like for right now, it's like, that's at least top 20 SNL music performance. I felt like Jack White absolutely slaughtered it. It was amazing. And then the little bit of the Eddie Van Halen tribute at the end, it all came together very nicely. And really kept the energy going for the episode.
100%.
I felt like that was the element that episode needed, was some just real, just balls to the wall rock and roll. And man, loved it. That was incredible.
I'm a little embarrassed that it took us an hour and 10 minutes even to acknowledge it, because you're absolutely right. It was an instant classic performance coupled with Bill Burr. Just the whole episode had a real throwback vibe. I mean, for Christ's sakes, like we talk about the Eddie Van Halen guitar, but the fact that he did a medley of Beyonce and Blind Willie Johnson, like a blues song from like 1928 or whatever. I mean, and it was so seamless. It was so perfect. Just that's an instant iconic performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I assume they can't do their regular SNL after parties because of the pandemic, but I don't know what they're doing after the shows or if they have a party in the studio or whatever it is, but you always hear cast members and former cast members talk about when they have this epic musical guest, they do their own mini party after with the musical guest, whether it was, Prince, or I've heard Fred Armisen talk about, a million times when he had a musical guest he absolutely loved. He convinced them to perform at the after party or just to hang out with them and stuff like that. And I just feel like Jack White is one of those guys that he was jamming after the show and they're all hanging out with him, like something like that.
Yeah. And he's been around. I mean, this isn't the first time, obviously, that Jack White's been on the show. So yeah. I'm sure everybody had fun to the degree that they could have after the show.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving forward from that, we have one episode coming up with host Issa Rae. And then we have more episodes coming. No announcement for the host yet. So we'll get into that a little bit more next week when we have some more information. But I'm going to go around the panel. Give me one thing that you want to see in the Issa Rae episode next week. Dave.
Boy, that's a great question. I would love to see some real acting. I think Issa's a great actress. And I'd like to see, I think she's going to be a great host, and I hope it's the first of many, because I think I'm a big fan of hers. I think she's brings a tenderness and a kind of sincerity to her acting that I think we can use on Saturday Night Live right now. And she also seems to have a very, I don't want to say elevate. Elevate is not the right word. Just very high bar for quality in her work, and I hope that translates into. I hope she brings everybody up to her level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about you, Andrew?
Honestly, I don't know much about her, and that's always a fun thing for me, is when I see somebody host the show that I don't really have much context for. That's always just a fun journey for me. I do know that she does come from the Black Lady sketch show, which if I just watched more television, I would have checked out, because what I did see of it did seem pretty damn fun.
A+ sketch.
Yeah. And if you say like she's more dramatic, then I just want this week to then carry over. Like, just please tighten up what we did with Bill Burr and just bring that into with Issa Rae, please. And and maybe some Chris Redd. I love Chris Redd, and it always seems like he's never ever given the due that he needs on the show. Like, he's always given one thing every couple episodes, and I love Chris. I think he's just naturally funny. And it's great to see Ego just be really anchoring it on the show, especially these last two episodes. But yeah, more Chris, and maybe more Melissa. Let's see what Andrew can do. maybe just this episode, give the people who have not been able to shine in the last 2 episodes their chance. And hopefully Issa can then bring them up to her level. And that should be fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Andy?
I want to echo both what Andrew and Dave have said. That all sounds great. Let's try it. Let's see what they can do. I think mostly I'd be really excited to see the show reflect the times that we're in. I think that Issa's that kind of host that could make the show reflect everything that's going on in a very funny and observant way. I'd love Punky Johnson as well to be given a chance to step up to the plate and hit a ground rule double. I think outside, just watching the show go in directions that it usually doesn't and probably won't. Maybe let's see a Celebrity Jeopardy or a Black Jeopardy come back. I think that could be a fun one to see her persona fit inside that format.
Yeah, and I think we even had a Family Feud suggestion last week from one of our panelists as well for her. So, there could be a lot of really cool things next week. I'm really excited to talk about it. Before we end our show, I'm going to go around the panel. I'll give you all one chance to plug anything you have going on. So, Dave, anything in the comedy scene?
Well, we're down in Austin. I own a theater called Cold Town Theater. It's an improv and sketch and stand-up theater. We're going dark until we can do shows again. So
dark like Bill Burr dark, or
dark as in like we don't have a space anymore. Masks. Hey, if you want to donate to Cold Town Theater and keep a struggling arts theater community alive that Andrew DeSmooks comes from, as well as Noah Wells, then please consider donating to Cold Town Theater, COLDTOWNE Theater, coldtowntheater.com.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
That Week in SNL, Vintage SNL podcast. This Friday, we'll have our second episode of the season. That's Kate Hudson and Radiohead from 2000. That's going to be a fun one to talk about. And then 2 weeks after that, what's this? We're talking about that Charles Grodin episode.
Yeah.
Is that Kate?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is that Kate Hudson, the one with the Japanese Laverne and Shirley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is.
So funny.
Yeah, and that's something, correct me if I'm wrong, Maya brought with her, right? Mm-hmm. Did you see? Okay. So anyway, that's that episode. Grodin after that. Then we're talking the Sarah Jessica Parker episode from season 20. Got a lot of fun things coming down the pike. A lot of fun guests in on the episodes with us. So that Week in SNL, you can find it wherever you find your podcasts.
Yeah, her monologue is that the Bruce Springsteen one. It's like her doing the song with like Adam Sandler, right?
Oh no, that's just a
devil.
sketch. That's just a sketch. That's just dueling guitarist, whatever the hell that sketch is. Yeah.
We'll definitely subscribe to that, and I'm really excited to hear that show. So we'll definitely be tuning in. Andy, do you tell everybody who you're going to have on your recaps week to week, or is it a surprise when the episode comes out?
It's a surprise to me, honestly. Okay. So yeah, definitely check out the Entertainment Weekly recaps. I try to update those in real time. I'll do 3 or 4 different segments as the show is going on, so you can follow along if you like. Otherwise, just check out the SNL in Review Twitter page, as well as hopefully I'll have some additional Vulture interviews down the pike as well too. So in the meantime, if folks want to check out my recent conversations with Siobhan Fallon and Denny Dillon and Dan Vitale, that would be great. Siobhan's great, by the way. Folks should also, I'd encourage them to follow her movie on social platforms, Rushed, which she wrote and produced. It's coming out with Robert Patrick and Ellen Cleghorn, actually. So a little bit of an SNL reunion there. So check her out and please check out Jeff Richards' podcast too.
Yeah. That's exciting. We're always, especially on this show, I want to follow the alumni, so it's really cool to talk about all that stuff. So yeah, like you heard, there's some amazing recaps in the community, amazing podcasts. If you love the shows that we're doing on a weekly basis, we have some really fun panelists that we've had on the show and ones that we have lined up for the next few weeks. We're gonna have all these guys back throughout the season, so we're gonna have more really exciting discussions like this. I love tonight's discussion. It was high energy, it was exciting, and it was exactly what I wanted. I told these guys before the show, I just want to be people hanging out at a bar talking about SNL, and I think that Andy, if your bourbon is any indication, I think we did that tonight. So
yeah, empty. I need to re-up.
Exactly. So we'll have to get through
vodka.
Okay, there you go. So we'll have to get through 2 of those at least next time you guys are on. But if you love SNL Stats and you're interested in the panel shows, and please follow our Twitter account at SNL Stats. Please look on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You search SNL Stats and you can see our shows. And on any podcatcher, we're available. We're there. Our shows go up on Tuesdays. We record on Mondays. And we're heading towards live show eventually. So we're just working out all those kinks. So should be really exciting. I hope you love the show so far. Please send me any feedback if you guys have. Anyways, thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, John.
No, thank you. And we will see you next week. Good night and have a pleasant week. We'll see you next time.